been voting Democrat for 30 years. How has your life gotten any better? A lot of moderate Democrats are saying, you know what, this isn't the Democrat Party I signed up for. Nobody wanted to defund the police. And these are all the ideas that progressives had, and they kind of just force this on everyone as dictators, going into some of these black communities, knocking on these doors and talking to voters, and hearing them say that I'm the first Republican they've ever met. That's a problem.
Our founding fathers here in this country brought about the idea that you and I have within ourselves the God-given right and the ability to determine our own destiny. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-thought lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction.
It's no secret that Democrats are trying to flip many Republican seats in Congress. I mean, look no further than the Gates 8, what they're trying to do to Matt Gaetz, Andy Biggs, and all of those guys. But what are Republicans doing to do the same thing? What are Republicans doing to flip Democratic seats? We're joined today by Kim Klacik. She's in Maryland trying to flip a D+7 seat. So Kim, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course, let's jump right into it. So the simple question, whenever you're running for any seat, they ask you, why are you running?
Yeah, so here in the 2nd Congressional District in Maryland, I am running against an opponent that is very progressive. He's currently the Baltimore County Executive. I live in Baltimore County, have been for 11 years, and he is just fine with allowing criminal illegal aliens into our communities. He's just fine with overcrowding of the schools. He's just fine with the education system failing the kids. And I said, you know what? I've had enough of this. And even though I had enough in 2020, and we didn't fare so well in that bid, luckily, as you mentioned, we've had redistricting here in the state of Maryland. And so it is a very competitive race in the 2nd Congressional District and 2 other districts as well. And so I thought, you know what? I've got to throw my hat in the ring. I can't stand by and just watch how progressives have slowly turned our country in another direction. And if I don't run, right, then I'm kind of like complicit and I'm allowing them to continue to do this and destroy our country. So, you know, even though 2020 was tough, and I feel like I still have some of the whiplash from it all. But I thought here in 2024, if I don't get in, I will just regret it. And the people deserve better.
Yeah, 2020, you ran, what was that, the 3rd district in Maryland?
That was actually the 7th district. I know that the numbers have changed now.
Yeah,
but yeah, the 7th district.
The 7th district. I think the incumbent in that race, he won with 70% of the vote. There's a heavy Democratic district, close to 70%. And then in 2022, in the current district that you're running in, the candidate on the Republican side had 40% of the vote. So we're seeing that there's an increase in the Republican percentage. Do you think that trajectory is going to continue in 2024? And if so, how does that play in your favor?
Yeah, well, I do think it's going to continue. You know, here in the state of Maryland, even though some people consider it a very blue state, I think what we've seen over the past 4 or 5 years, a lot of moderate Democrats are saying, you know what, this isn't the Democrat Party I signed up for, say back when JFK was in charge, right? It is a totally different party. And so you've got moderate Democrats really leaning towards the center and also towards the right. And it's not that they're changing their party affiliation, but they're saying, you know what, we might have to vote differently because our options are so limited. They don't want what the progressives are selling, right? They want parental rights in schools. They want their kids educated. They want public safety. Nobody wanted to defund the police. And these are all the ideas that progressives had, and they kind of just force this on everyone as dictators. And so I do think that there's going to be a huge shift. Do I think it's going to be in the party affiliation as whether or not they actually register as Republicans? No. But I do believe in 2024, you'll see a lot of Democrats voting for Republican candidates.
And Maryland's just the neighboring state to me here in Delaware, so I'm pretty familiar with the landscape of the Maryland politics. You had Larry Hogan, the moderate Republican, as governor recently, and now he's running for the Senate as the moderate Republican. Tell us about what you think is going to happen when you look at, it's a heavy D7 plus district. The incumbent's not running. This is a new guy who said is pretty extremist, who's already in local politics. Do you think the local people in your district actually realize how extreme he is? Because everyone sees the national politics, they see how extreme Biden is, or even say AOC. But do they see at the local level where you're at today?
Yes, they do see it, and that is because, and as you said, you're right up the street there in Delaware. Towson, I don't know how familiar you are with the city of Towson. Towson University is there. That used to be an upscale neighborhood. Right now, they're dealing with a lot of crime, a lot of violence, and a huge uptick in carjackings. And a lot of the perpetrators are juveniles, and so they know that this Baltimore County executive was one of those that were championing this new law that we have here in the state of Maryland, whereas if you are a juvenile under a certain age, you will not be charged for carjackings, car theft in general, or even some of these what they considered low level crimes. So we do have a lot of people, like I said, in upscale communities like Towson, which are very liberal areas. They're looking at the situation saying, wow, my neighbor just had their car stolen 2 days ago. I would have never seen this maybe 5 years ago. And that was before the Baltimore County executive took over. So, yes, I do believe that there are a lot of people waking up here.
So you're saying that the key issue for your district voters would be the increase in crime? Is that what you're saying?
The increase in crime and then how they're handling the criminal illegal aliens. We do have one of those county executives that have been ignoring the detainer request from ICE. So if you have an illegal immigrant that has been charged with whether it is sexual assault or any kind of crime, when that judge decides to release that individual, they usually put on the charging documents, I'm not going to charge this individual. They're not here legally, but please check to make sure ICE or the federal government doesn't also want them with the detainer request. What Baltimore County Executive Oshesky and Baltimore County has been doing is they see those detainer requests and then they release those criminal legal aliens, and then in an email after they release them, they actually contact ICE or the ICE director and say, hey, just so you know, this person is no longer in our custody. If you want to go pick them up, you can. And so they do this because they're saying to keep them behind bars until ICE picks them up. And their view is against their constitutional rights. But as we all know, illegal aliens don't even have constitutional rights in our country. But this is that sanctuary city mindset that they have.
Well, we would say they don't have constitutional rights. The court supposedly ruled that they can own a gun. They have the constitutional right to bear arms, but other Americans don't.
Right.
That's okay. Uh, but you ran in 2020. What have you learned since? It's been quite a few years. How many things have you learned since?
That's a great question.
Taking into this race.
That's a great question. Oh man, when we first dropped that red dress campaign ad, before that we were kind of just trucking along, right? We had the special election and the general election, and people kind of noticed us, but not really as much, right? We were doing some news hits there, here and there. But when we dropped that campaign ad, it really awakened a lot of people across the country. And we were truly blessed for that. We were blessed to have the endorsement of Donald Trump. And so because all of that happened so quickly, right? It happened in August. Obviously, the election day was just there in November. At that time, it was November 3rd. But we only had a couple of months to really, gain some traction, get the vote out, get the word out, telling people exactly who we were. We were able at that time to send mailers, to send text messages, and all these things that we need, because at that point we had raised the money that we needed to really be competitive in this district. And so I learned at that time, who to go with, right? Whether it's consultants, a lot of people will tell you that they have the strategy and the key to win. But there are a lot of people, even the Republican Party, that are there to do like a money grab on new candidates like myself. And so I did not know that going in. Of course, once we raised $8.4 million off of that campaign ad, of course, there were a lot of people that descended on us and said, "Oh, I can make sure you can win this seat." Right? It was all these people coming out of the woodwork. So we learned who to trust and who not to trust. We also learned how to speak to voters a lot better. I did a lot of polling when I was running there towards the end of our race in 2020. And there were a lot of voters in the district that said, we understand what you said in that ad. The campaign ad was true, but the way that you said it kind of turned us off, right? So we're trying to be a little more gentle, I guess, when it comes to our message. I don't really subscribe to that personally, but you have to remember a lot of these Democrats, they vote based on their emotions. And so if you come at them, just with this strong verbiage, a lot of times you'll turn them away immediately. And so we have been a lot softer with our message. We've been saying to people, look, here's where you were, 6 years ago, here's where you are today. You as a voter have to decide where you want to be tomorrow. And so that's what we're kind of doing is we're leaving it up to them and not making them feel as though that we're trying to force them to make a decision they're not quite ready to make. So messaging has changed, who we have surrounding us in the campaign has changed, and also the way that we're really spending money and the way that we're approaching some of the things that we're doing. We found out what works and what doesn't work. We found out that text messages on election day, they work very well, sending those out to voters. And so we didn't know that the first time around. And I will say, lastly, we did not realize at the time that ballot harvesting was legal in the state of Maryland. And so the Democrat Party knew that. And so they were collecting ballots from vacant homes. They were collecting ballots at nursing homes. They were doing whatever they could, knocking on doors, collecting ballots, these mail-in ballots. And so here in 2024, we know what we can do, what we can't do, what's against the law, and what is still within the law. And so we're playing the same game the Democrats are playing.
So how are you implementing these grassroots strategies, like the ones that Turning Point Action that have popularized the RNC is pushing today? I mean, all the things you're saying are just simple grassroots things that win elections. How are you implementing those in this campaign?
Yeah, no, so, and I say this all the time on whether it's social media. I really appreciate Turning Point USA. I appreciate Charlie Kirk and what they've been doing. My red dress ad, a lot of people don't know this, but it was directed and scripted by Benny Johnson. He did a fantastic job with a lot of new candidates, and they really embraced a lot of us, even though they didn't exactly know us as individuals. But they said, look, this is where you're standing, we're going to help you, right? Because we want to see new faces in the party. We want our party to show that we have a younger generation that's up and coming. So I appreciate Turning Point. Like you said, there are a lot of people, whether they're at Towson University or Loyola, they're helping us with the grassroots level. But we're doing a lot of door knocking. We're doing a lot of sign waving. We're showing up at events. We're showing up at carnivals. We love the fact that Scott Pressler's out there registering voters. We have people here in the state of Maryland that are following suit. They're registering voters wherever they go as well, because Scott has been doing such a great job showing people that it is just that easy to do. And so, yeah, grassroots, I think, is what's going to win this race. I know my opponent's going off of name recognition, but, I don't think name recognition is going to get him in this time around.
Yeah, you mentioned Towson University, Loyola, and then Benny Johnson. I think Benny really appeals to the youth and how he structures his content, what it looks like, the stuff he talks about. What are you seeing on the ground among the youth? Are they going to the right? Are they still on the left? Where are they at?
Well, I'm really encouraged here. I see so many young people going towards the right, and you know what? I think a lot of it had to do with social media. But you hit the nail on the head there. Benny Johnson, Turning Point. They're now going to a lot of these college campuses and just asking basic questions, right? And they're getting all this on film. And some people are looking at it as, oh, it's just social media content, but it's not. It is showing people that there are a lot of young individuals who have very impressionable minds, and they are being, basically manipulated by some of those, whether they're professors or such on campus. But when Charlie Kirk and Turning Point show up and they say, hey guys, here's the facts, and just follow where the facts lead you, and you've got a lot of young people saying, you know what? I really never looked into it. I really just kind of listened to what the adults around me were saying. I didn't look at it myself. So I think nowadays there are so many young people that have been waking up. And even though it's like a double-edged sword, right? Social media is good in some ways, bad in some ways. But it's been very good at enlightening the young mind so they can see exactly what's going on in real time with a lot of these current events. So, yeah, I think a lot of young people are definitely facing towards the right.
And I think if we look at the past elections, like 2012, 2016, 2020, each of those elections usually had one social media platform that influenced them. Whether it was like 2016 with Facebook, 2020 with Instagram, you see 2024 as the X election. You see it, Twitter, X is really reaching a lot of new voters, especially young people on X. What do you say?
Yeah, no, X is doing a great job. And I think Instagram and then also TikTok. And even though it's like I have a TikTok account, I guess I'm so old. I have a TikTok account. I'm not the best at using it. But I do know that there are a lot of people sharing a lot of TikTok clips, even on X, saying, hey, here's someone just pointing out the facts, whether they were at a Trump rally, whether they were at some event where Republicans were getting together, just people being able to see what others are talking about. Again, on the left, they're very emotional voters. They do look to people that look like them for answers. And so when you have some of these black celebrities like the rapper Waka Flocka, who's saying, I support Trump 100%, and here's why, or even 50 Cent. 50 Cent's not, people, look, people aren't realizing it, maybe in other places, but people should understand that 50 Cent and others, they're showing you who they're supporting by not saying that they're supporting Joe Biden or the Democrat Party. And so there are a lot of people that are looking at those videos, looking at some of those clips and saying, hey, you know what? I look up to this person. I'm going to go with what they're going with because they obviously see it at another level that I might not quite see it. And so I think, yes, X, TikTok, and Instagram, and who knows, even Snapchat.
Yeah, and I fully agree with you there. Reaching Gen Z is right in my wheelhouse. That's what I'm focusing on now. But I hear that you used to be a Democrat back before 2009. I know the walkaway movement. I've helped them quite a bit with Brandon, all of them. How has being a former Democrat helped you communicate your message, going to these urban voters in the inner city, like you're saying? You learn how to communicate. How has being a Democrat helped do that?
Yeah, and Brandon Strzok with Rockaway, he's done such a great job with that. So for me, in 2009, just so people know, in 2008, I drank the Kool-Aid. I voted for President Barack Obama, and it's not because I thought, oh, we have to have this black president. I was so sick of people saying that black people were oppressed and that we weren't getting ahead in life. Like, I was just so sick of the message. I'm saying, okay, well, here's a black guy. He's now the president of the United States of America. Can we all stop acting like we are oppressed? Like, I've had enough of this narrative, right? We're now in the White House. But I was so disappointed because here he could have really honed in on that message and talked about, overcoming different obstacles in his own personal life. But that's not what he did. He got in the office and still said that black people were oppressed. He still said that the police were preying on black individuals and predominantly black communities, and that we should be afraid of the police, even though we needed more officers in our community because there are public safety concerns. And so for me, I felt like he did a complete 180. He started surrounding himself by the likes of Jesse Jackson, the Reverend Al Sharpton, and so he was kind of pushing that same message of just being oppressed and being a victim. And I just couldn't take it anymore. I said, I can't live like this. And so in 2009, I switched my party affiliation, not because of just Barack Obama, but when you really take a look at the Republican Party and the freedom, and then you take a look at history, right? People, a lot of people don't know in the Democrat Party, the KKK was started by the Democrats. It was the Republicans that freed the slaves. And so you take a look at Frederick Douglass and all those in history, you're like, you know what? Why am I in the Democrat Party? It makes no sense for me to be as a black woman in the Democrat Party. And a lot of people don't want to talk about it, but the Democrat Party opposed blacks the right to run for office and to vote. And so it only made sense for me to be in the party that did not oppose such. So like you said, I switched my party in 2009 and I've never looked back.
And like you're saying, I think it was 1854 or something, somewhere in the mid 1800s. The purpose of the Republican Party, why it was founded, was to go against the Democratic Party, which was the slavery party. So most people don't even know that today. And when you're going into the inner city, you can't really say the red meat answer or the red meat talking points when you're talking to these inner city voters. How do you go about those conversations to win those fringe voters?
Yeah, and so that's what's so tough. And I do put a little bit of on the Republican Party. Back in 2020, I had the opportunity to speak at the RNC convention, and I did mention the fact that, going into some of these predominantly black communities, knocking on these doors and talking to voters and hearing them say that I'm the first Republican they've ever met, that's a problem, right? We need to make sure that we contest these seats in the city. But not only that, we need to make sure that we approach individuals and say, hey, here's why I'm a Republican, and here's why I think that you would benefit from voting for a Republican. So every door that we approach, every voter that we approach, for Democrats, it might take them 2 minutes to say, yeah, vote for me, I'm your guy. But for a Republican, we might be standing on someone's front porch for 20 minutes trying to explain to them the history of the Democratic and Republican Party and to explain to them what the future could look like. So as you mentioned earlier about the grassroots efforts, it's time consuming. It's going to take a lot to continue to chip away in some of these areas, but we have to do it. Because if we're going to get anywhere in the Republican Party, and I think we started the show mentioning, you see a lot of states going from red to purple to blue. We need to make sure these states go from blue to purple to red. We can do it, but we can't quit, and we got to make sure we talk to everyone individually. And I know it seems like an overwhelming task, but we're up to the challenge.
I fully agree with that. When you're talking to these, when you're going door knocking in the inner city, is it the Republican Party stereotype? The old white guy who's running for Congress? Is that what's killing us here, or is it just not avoiding them altogether, or are they just so brainwashed that all they know is to vote Democrat? What
Yeah,
is it that really gets to them?
I think it's a little bit of all of those items that you mentioned. Unfortunately, they do look at the Republican Party as a party of racism, and a lot of that is because of the media, right? So then you have to try to make sure that you explain gently, because these are sometimes emotional voters. You gently explain to them, here's why the Republican Party is not racist, right? You start there, and then usually they'll say, okay, well, here's why I vote Democrat. And they'll give you a list of items, and then you just ask them point blank. It's like, all right, you've been voting Democrat for 30 years. How has your life gotten any better? Has it gotten better? Has it gotten worse? If they bring up President Trump, which a lot of black voters do, first they'll say, oh, well, President Trump is racist. He's against black people. And the only thing you really have to say is you say, all right, when your life, how was your life before 2016 when he became the president? And they'll say either it's the same way it is now or it was, sometimes worse because he did do a lot for black unemployment when Trump was there. And so I just explain to people, I say, look, that if Trump's not your issue, right? A lot of this comes down to local legislators, the state legislators, and of course, members of Congress that are enforcing things on the federal level. And what the media is trying to do is make you believe that this all comes down to President Trump when it's really not the case. And so I also talk about the opportunity zones and some of the things that Trump has done for the black community, but I also make it known that it's not about one community. Because when we all thrive, when we are all successful as a country and we are united as the states should be, then we all can benefit from that. And it leaves a positive impact. I said the best thing we could do is make sure we have national security, bring some of our jobs, our manufacturing jobs back home. The Baltimore region used to be a manufacturing powerhouse. We let China completely take over. It's time to bring those things back home, offers incentives for corporations to bring those jobs back home. And then, of course, I always talk about welfare reform. I know for a lot of people it's hard to hear it. But, when I approach individuals and I say, okay, you're looking at 4 generations of your family on government assistance. How far have you gotten on this government assistance? And they'll all tell you the same. They've gotten absolutely nowhere. And that's why it's important for them to be financially independent. And I talk about how we can reform the welfare system to get you there. Because if you're an able-bodied American, it should be temporary, not permanent.
I think that's a great, really simple way to put it. And you pointed out the things that Trump did for the black community when he was president. And you look at his polling today among the black community, he's polling far higher than really any Republican's done in the past few decades. Is that because of what he did through 2016, 2020? Is that because of what they're doing to him, trying to put him in jail? What do you see on the ground?
Well, when I talk to people, I think a lot of people will say that they felt like things were going a heck of a lot better before the pandemic. And they know when President Trump was in office and he didn't have the COVID pandemic to deal with, things were going better, right? Gas prices were down, grocery prices were down. We didn't have these supply chain issues. He was about being energy independent, which has a ripple effect. And he was talking about bringing manufacturing back to cities like Baltimore. We were talking even during the pandemic about bringing the billion-dollar medical equipment industry back to cities like Baltimore, right? We've got Johns Hopkins, we've got all these elite doctors and hospitals. We can make sure that we bring some of those things back home, and it would really complement what we have here in the Baltimore region. And so these are things that I talked about. I was able to bring some leaders from West Baltimore to the West Wing to meet with President Trump's administration. Jerron Smith, to be exact, he was in the West Wing working with Jared Kushner hand in hand. They were talking about bringing manufacturing jobs back. And so I was able to bring some leaders from West Baltimore to that table, and many of them were impressed. Many of them said, look, we couldn't even get a meeting with Barack Obama when he was there. And here we are sitting in the West Wing with President Trump's administration. And so I think people realize that Trump, he's not in it for himself. He wants the country to thrive because he knows as a businessman, that's how he will thrive ultimately as well. So that's what we're focused on, entrepreneurship, bringing jobs home, and really cleaning our communities up when it comes to crime and violence. And they know that Trump is about the same thing.
I think that's Trump's greatest strength today. That he's not in it for himself. He has all the money. He doesn't need anything. He's doing it out of his love for the country. And when we look at his VP pick, he has to announce his VP by the end of the RNC convention next week. By the time this episode's up, VP will be announced, and we'll know. But when you look at the inner city, do you think any of these VP picks that are being talked about, even Dr. Carson being from close to Baltimore, or Tim Scott, do any of these people appeal to the black voters more than another and help Trump pick up more ground among the black community?
So I haven't heard much conversation on that front when it comes to being in the communities and talking to voters. I think a lot of people are just looking at the top of the ticket, right? Trump versus Biden. I will say though, for me personally, I think Dr. Ben Carson. I think he's a very smart man. I've been able to hear him speak publicly. He's actually extremely charismatic. You might not see it come across in some of his media hits because it's only like a 4-minute hit. But he really has that personality. He really does care, and he has the expertise, the intelligence to get it done. I personally also like Senator Marco Rubio, and I do like J.D. Vance out of Ohio. J.D. Vance, I think he's very capable of the job, and I think he could also deliver the state of Ohio. It's not too much into play, but sometimes it's been a swing state in the past, and I think that he'll do a great job. But I'm also looking at who could be the next guy, right? Because in 2028, we're going to be looking to see who can Trump pass that torch on to. And I think that anybody that we have currently on this list, whether it's Byron Donalds, Tim Scott, everybody we have on the roster, I think are capable of getting the job done. So now I think it just comes down to who Trump feels like he can work with and who would complement his administration well.
Yeah, it's really just determining whether he wants to pass the torch to his VP or he wants to steady the ship until 2028 and decide in the primaries then. But I've got one final mini question for you. I close with this with everyone. If you could tell America or my generation, Gen Z, one thing not to give up, what would it be?
Oh gosh, don't give up hope. Your generation is the future. And like I said earlier, when it comes to Turning Point or some people like yourself, the fact that you guys are so engaged and that you are on the front lines, that encourages people like myself that's a generation above. And I say, look, we're in good hands. Please don't give up hope. I know that it's rocky and I know it's tough now, but there are so many of you that are more than capable of being that next group of leaders. There's so many of you that are capable of going to Congress, going to the White House. And I love the fact that you guys, like I said, are so engaged in this conversation at such a young age. I wish I did the same. I wish I had Turning Point when I was younger. But the fact that you have it now, I love it. So please don't give up hope. Don't ever get discouraged. If you feel as though you can run for office, no matter your age, if you feel like you're so young, but you still make it, according to the age requirement, get out there and go. Do it. I am one of those people where I will support you. I have the PAC Red Renaissance. We kind of shelved it a little bit here as I'm running for office. But with our PAC, what we do is we support those that are new and fresh to the scene. It doesn't matter what color you are. I just want people with new ideas and that are passionate and that are ready to go. And so please don't ever give up. Don't ever lose hope. And I hope that your audience follows me through this journey. They can go to kimkforcongress.com if they want to sign up to volunteer or make a donation. And don't forget, you can do phone banking wherever you are in the country. So if you want to, work with us and you're all the way, stay in the state of Michigan, you can also call voters from there here in the state of Maryland and let them know that I'm running and that they should get out and vote.
I fully agree with you, Kim. And it's people like you, Charlie and Benny, people like that are investing in my generation. It's really going to get us to be the future that we need, the future that we want, future that we all desire going forward. So I got to thank you for investing into us, really pouring yourself into us to make sure we are the future. So Kim, thanks for joining us today. It's been a great conversation.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.